Welcome to Shop Talk Live, episode number 349. Today we have an interesting episode for you. A couple months ago, I got an email from Mike Mascelli. Mike basically asked if he could take over the show. And there are very few people who I would let take over the show, but Mike gets to take over the show for an episode. It's a cool one. John Coffey, French polisher extraordinaire, Mitch Kohanek, godfather of finishing, and our very own, our very favorite, Mike Mascelli. Before we get started, want to remind everyone, Woodworking in America is coming up October 10th and 11th, Des Moines, Iowa. Honestly, get tickets, come hang out, be surrounded by woodworkers. Stop being the only person in the room who wants to talk about sharpening. Stop being the only person in the room who wants to talk about how cool an L-fence is. Be around everyone else who likes that stuff too. Head on over to woodworkinginamerica.com. Sign up. All right, here we go. Mike Mascelli, friend of the podcast, friend of woodworkers all across the world, friend to everyone who he's ever met in his entire life. What was it? Maybe 2 months ago, you came to me and said, "Hey, we need to do something." What are we here to do?
Well, Ben, thank you for agreeing to do this.
I'm basically just handing the podcast over to you right now. All right.
I know. You're scary stuff, Ben. Several months ago, one of the giants of the industry passed away, and I thought, since I had a personal connection to him and had some stories to tell, and I have some friends that are going to join us in doing this, that we would do a little fine woodworking tribute to Bob Flexner, author of this. I know most of you are listening, but the book for which Bob is the most famous is Understanding Wood Finishing. And joining us are my two dear friends, John Coffey from Long Island, who is a master of French polish and a conservation specialist for a lifetime, and also Mitch Kohanek, who is the now retired director of a wood finishing program at Dakota County College in Minnesota for almost 30 years to teach, and I want to say this slowly, a 9-month program on wood finishing, the only one in the country. And Mitch is still very much alive and teaching, and he's got some stories to tell as well once we get through this. But my plan here for the audience is just to give a little background, because many people may have seen Bob's book, but I want to just set a little quick context, which is I grew up in the 50s, and in the baby boom time, there was this huge outswell of interest in what we would now call DIY. The idea that we would fix everything, that people would do things at home, that you would be a handyman, that you would get popular mechanics, that you would fix stuff. So most of the parents of my generation's peers had furniture that was some new, but mostly their parents' furniture. So there were some enterprising people who saw a market to try to come into what we now call refinishing. And one of the leaders of that was a fellow called Bixen, Mr. Bix. And he created a series of national franchise little storefronts to do stripping of furniture. So you would bring it to some place, they would strip it, give it back to you, and then you would, and I use this word in quotes, refinish.
That's Bix Strip, right? That's
Mr. Bix.
Okay. Wow. All right. Okay.
And his son, Benny Bixen, a dear friend of ours, continued that company on for many, many years, and it's going still as Benco. So back in the day, think about this, there was no internet. There was no mass communication, and basically furniture was either shellac, it was oil-based varnish, or maybe it was lacquer, but there was no water-based stuff. It was just the brown furniture of your parents' and grandparents' generation. And in a little town in Oklahoma called Norman, ironically where the Storm Center is, a fellow started a restoration business to fix furniture. And he was a little bit older. He was born in 1940. His name is Bob Flexner. So he's a baby boom early guy, and he's got a furniture business. And he got frustrated because there was no information that was solid about what was going on. Why did this not stick to that? Why did this turn a certain color? What's this chemical reaction? So Bob took it upon himself to try to learn this stuff. And he got involved in what was then a series of woodworking shows, which Mitch also got involved in. That's how they met. And I'll let Mitchie tell those stories. But Bob, through his own initiative, had independent laboratories test products. He knocked on the doors of manufacturers. He became a pain in their butt to try to get information about what's in the can. What is this stuff in here? And what he eventually determined through a whole bunch of his own research turned into the book, which if anybody who's watching can see behind, next to me here, is called Understanding Wood Finishing in 1994. And this is chemistry and physics and optics, and it's the truth of what the finishes do and why they do it. And it's just a landmark book that broke down the barriers about what all the mystery was, because it turned out there wasn't all that much mystery, and most of what's in those cans was the same stuff was in the other guy's cans. So in late part of 1996, 97, Bob started teaching, doing videos, early VHS videos. And I became aware of the book. I loved the book. And I saw a notice, I believe it was in Fine Woodworking, that said Bob Flexner is going to be teaching at this little teeny school up in Maine that had just started. It's now called the Center for Furniture Craftsmanship in Camden, or in Rockport, Maine. So I went to a weekend seminar with Bob Flexner in 1997, and I can honestly say it really did change a lot of my life. Bob and I hit it off. He talked and talked and talked, and we had a bunch of sessions after class, and he said, there's this guy in Idaho that's starting up an internet thing. Internet was new. We had dial-up modems. And he said, there's this other guy in Minnesota who's got a school thing going, and he's a cool guy. Well, I'll make a very long story short. The guy in Idaho was called Alan Marriage, and he was a refinisher like Bob was, and his thought was, I'm going to make money with this new internet thing. Never did he have in his mind that he was going to start something that turned into what it became, which was a network of people who were interested in this business. So and we had an email server, basically. We started with about 25 people in 1998. It eventually grew to hundreds and hundreds of people, and a moderated daily email. That's how I met John. And then, I got connected to Mitch. Mitch had been at school at the Smithsonian with Don Williams, and so had John. That's how they originally met. And then we eventually roped Don Williams into our email group, the Professional Refinishers, and we got the head of education from Mohawk, Greg Williams, who became a foundational figure who wrote a column for Woodshop News for many, many years on finishing. We had Jeff Jewett, Michael Dresner, Terry Masacci, everybody you can name at one point or another passed through this organization of the stuff that we like to talk about. And then Bob decided to put together a couple of in-person conferences. He did the first one in Las Vegas in 2002. 2001, and then another one in Sturbridge, Massachusetts, which I went to. And these were the first time that people actually got together face to face and started to talk about this as a trade. And Bob's big vision was he wanted to create a dialogue. He wanted to have a network of people that were interested in this business that could talk to each other. And then he decided he was going to start a magazine. Again, I've got this image right here behind me called Professional Refinishing. And this was in 2001, 2002. And then a lot of the folks that we were connected to became the authors and contributors, Alan Knoll and Greg and Mitch and myself and so on. And the magazine was connected to a large publishing company. Ben, you can relate to this. And they had other magazines like Pool and Spa and other like do-it-yourself kind of magazines. And the magazine did okay for a couple of years. It didn't make any money, and they basically dropped it. But after that, very shortly after we had a big gathering at Mitch's in 2002, our founder, our dear friend Alan Marriage in Idaho, died suddenly in a car accident. And all of a sudden, everybody looked at me and said, what are we going to do? And I just want to remind all your listeners and my dear friends out there, I'm an upholsterer by trade. I kind of got roped into this with this bunch of guys accidentally. And I kind of took over the management of this thing we call group. And I have been doing it ever since up to now. And we have had hundreds of members come through there. And we still have a very active about 160, 170 members still connected now in a Facebook private group about conservation and restoration and refinishing. So it's really, kind of an amazing thing that 30 years after I met Bob, I decided I could combine all of the knowledge I gained from all these people that I met into a course that I wound up doing for fine woodworking. That thank you all of anybody who's listening that took that class. Thank you. I've gotten a lot of nice comments back, but the irony of me being the one to teach it is just kind of cool after all these years. So that's the kind of the backstory. And let me just get a little bit about the Bob story. He passed away this year in January of 2026 at the age of 84. The most amazing thing I can tell you from his personal biography is this. The Understanding Wood Finishing is in its third or fourth publication. The one that's next to me is the original version. I have a signed copy here. I don't think anybody is going to believe me when I say this number. That book has had 750,000 copies in print. And anybody
Are you
who's
serious?
Ben's jaw just hit the floor. 750,000 copies. This book has never been out of print.
Book on wood finishing.
It is the only wood-related book that's in the Amazon the top 1,000. It's the only book.
Wow.
This book has been used, and Mitch will hopefully tell the stories about how it was used in classrooms then and now. It's absolutely staggering. And just a little bit about Bob. When he was in college, this is during the war years, Vietnam. He was in the ROTC. He eventually got stationed at the Pentagon. He spoke 3 languages. He spoke fluent Russian and Danish. He went to Denmark, met his wife there. He went to Israel, worked on a kibbutz. I mean, he was a really interesting, well-rounded, extremely intelligent person that mastered, all of these different disciplines. And fascinating to me, he was able to recycle this content from this original book for basically the next 30 years. He wrote, I've got some copies here. He wrote for Woodshop News regularly. He wrote for Fine Woodworking. In the early days before the internet, people would write a letter into Fine Woodworking, and then an expert like Bob would, in the next issue, would answer the letter. So in a primitive way, it was a dialogue. That's what Bob always wanted. But I will say this in the most honest and flattering way. Bob was extremely opinionated, and he knew that he was right about most things. So in some ways, he was a little bit difficult to accept, different ideas. And eventually he adapted the book to the newer finishes, the waterborns, and so on and so on. But to this day, in every woodcraft store, every woodworking, Highland Woodworking, everybody still has this book, and they still sell. So, as you would say, Ben, the giants like Krenov and Maloof and all those guys, Bob is in the pantheon.
Yeah,
he is a person that all of us stand upon and say, thank you for bringing us the knowledge of how to use these products and be able to make a living. So that's kind of my intro. And what I'd like to do, if I can, is just very briefly hand this over to my friend John Coffey, who has made a living on Long Island as a conservator and a woodworker extraordinaire. John is the kind of person who's a one-man shop who can basically fix anything, whatever it is, from a primitive antique to a modern one. And I think I can say modestly, John Coffey has French polished more wood surface than probably anybody in America. He is a remarkably proficient and hardworking guy that's just doing what he's doing all these years. So your turn, John. You're on.
Well, I'm up to my 4th football field of French polishes. French
You got that right.
This week.
Yeah, I've got the book too. I think everybody, every refinisher I've met has this book. But that book came out about 10 years after I started business. I mean, I was in business. I started in the antique restoration trade in like 70, 78, 79. And there was nothing out there. And I was so hungry for information because I felt like it was just me and I had no colleagues. I had nobody around. And it wasn't until I went to the Smithsonian to take a gilding class, and then subsequently met Don Williams, who said, well, Mitch has got a class going, and I teach there in the summer times. And so I was going out to Mitch's place every summer for a while. And that's where, and then I was told that there's this trade group. And now I met my colleagues, and it was like, and they're still the dearest friends to this day. I mean, they're the people I love the most. When we go to a conference, I mean, it never ends. We're talking wood and furniture and finishing till 12 o'clock at night. It's not like we're it's a busman's holiday. But
well, John, if I can, everybody, we kind of rehearsed this a little bit the other day. If you would please you went back and looked at the fine woodworking.
Oh, I'm going to. That was my next thing. Tell that story. Yeah. So, like I said, I was hungry for stuff, and when I started the trade, I subscribed to fine woodworking, and of course, starting in turn my back to you, but starting in.
For our audio-only listeners, John has got a stack of fine woodworkings.
I do.
I
got a big stack.
That looks like it's been curated.
Yeah.
And
well, this one has been. I went through, because what I did was I used the fine woodworking index to find out everything that Bob Flexner had written in fine woodworking. And it starts in 1987. And I decided to reread them for this podcast, and it's like, oh yeah, I remember that. I say the same thing. I was telling Mitch, I said, there's a little bit of Bob Flexner's DNA in me now, opinionated and everything. But yeah, and the great thing for me was Bob Flexner. It wasn't just about refinishing; it was also about restoration, and so he helped me on both fronts, wood shrinkage and, compression set and, and basically also a lover of shellac. So that was the thing. I hadn't met anybody who loved shellac the way I loved shellac until I met Don Williams. And then, and then Mitch as well, because Mitch also is a great French polisher. He learned from the master's hand. I learned from his reading in fine woodworking, George Frank. And once I had read that article, I mean, I had been French polishing beforehand, but I hadn't really gotten the method quite as down pat as when I started. And I would read the George Frank article in the bathroom. And then I'd go out and French polish, and then I'd read it again, and then I'd French polish and read it again until it really became, second nature to me. I've learned most of what I know about reading and applying it. And Mitch and I were talking about it. The first time you teach someone, they only get 20% of what you're saying. Mm-hmm. So you have to kind of go over it, and try to apply what you just learned and do it again until it does finally sink in.
So John, I know you bring up George Frank, who is another one of the godfathers of furniture finishing. I know George Frank was a shellac guru, right?
Right.
When I think of Bob, I think of like the textbook, and I think of like a knowledge of all finishing. Right. It's if you need to know the basics of anything in that aisle of the woodworking supply store, you reach for Flexner. Was he a shellac enthusiast, a shellac fan like you?
Well, in the book, he doesn't spend. He spends some time on shellac, but he talks about a lot of other things that you also need to know as a refinisher: stain and color theory and matching and all that other stuff. But I know from being an antique restorer, and he was an antique restorer, that he had to deal with shellac on a daily basis because, first off, most of the stuff that would come through his hands would be in shellac, and so you had to learn how to deal with that material. And it was just, and it also solves, it's a material that solves a great many problems if you're using it as a sealer under anything you want to put on top of it. And Mitch will be able to talk more about that because he deals with the minutia of all the different finishes available. For me, once I had discovered shellac, it was, for furniture, it was what I felt was, it solved all my problems. I didn't have to worry about dust. I didn't have to worry about fumes. I didn't have to worry about. I work in a small spaces. You've seen my space. So shellac became the material that solved pretty much all my problems. I have no. I don't ever think that if only I had this space, I could shoot lacquer or I could use conversion varnishes. I wouldn't change. I wouldn't change a thing. So I have found, the thing that I love the most and learned how to perfect the material. But the book deals with all the other things. I've varnished boats, so you have to learn about varnishing.
You varnish boats?
Oh yeah, I used to own. I've owned I don't know how many wooden boats. And Bob Van Dyke is a big boat guy. When we go there, we talk about boats all the time.
I had no clue.
So that's well, you haven't read my website.
I didn't know that about Bob either, though. Yeah, okay.
Boats and guitars got me into woodworking.
Yeah,
I was a science nerd, and when I discovered boats and guitars, it was like, well, my life changed. But varnish was the material for doing boats, and then epoxy. Then I learned about epoxy, another thing that solves problems.
Ben, if I can just jump in on behalf of Bob, what John said is exactly right. Bob really felt that he certainly respected shellac and talked about shellac, but if you look at all of his later writings and all of the woodshop news articles and everything else, he tries to be the man who has all the answers to all the questions.
Yeah.
So shellac is just one of many things in a toolkit. But Bob really wanted to be everything to everybody. And I think that might be actually a pretty good segue to what Mitch is going to talk about, because Mitch really also tried to teach his students the whole range of all the things possible. So maybe we should give Mitch a shot here. What do you say, Mitch?
Real quick, Mike, can you introduce, because Mitch isn't going to brag, I can tell.
I will.
Can you brag for him? Because Mitch's legacy is pretty deep. And correct me if I'm wrong, Mitch was not really teaching enthusiasts, right?
No.
Okay.
No, I'll try to set this up, everybody. This is Mitch Kohanek. The program was at the Dakota County Community College in Minnesota. It was a 2-year certificate, a 9-month certificate bearing program. So it was a trade school. You would go there to learn welding, whatever the other trades would be. And Mitch's program was to teach people to become professionals in the trade of wood finishing. So this is not a weekend casual class. This is a trade school class where the goal at the end is you're going to be able to go out into the world and work in a factory where they're doing production finishing. You're going to be able to be a touch-up artist. You're going to be able to do, and the most incredible thing, if we go out over the whole United States, there are literally hundreds of people. Mitch did this program for almost 30 years that are connected either directly or indirectly to that program. And so many of the professionals that are out there doing amazing work in wood finishing, and I can give you a whole bunch of names, are former students or alumni of Mitch's program. So his influence is absolutely everywhere in all these different shops, even for people who don't necessarily know that the guy that retired that taught them went to Mitch. Mm-hmm. So that Mitch's legacy is out there in generations of people doing wood finishing. And to this day, he is consulting with places that are having trouble with finishing problems, and he is still a consultant, and he still teaches actively at Mark Adams with some mutual friends of ours to help out a little bit because the classes are so huge. But Mitch, you would go there and you would learn spray finish, touch up, color, all of it, and it was a rigorous program where your work got graded, and if you didn't meet the grade, you did it over. So Mitch is a taskmaster, I'll say that. You can ask any of his former students. And the other thing that is incredible is that at the beginning of that program, he had the great, unbelievable good luck to have a visiting instructor named George Frank. So that comes right back to the beginning. And for those folks that don't know, George's famous book is called Adventures in Wood Finishing, and it's really a storybook about his adventures after the war in Paris. But
there
George
was John digging out a copy of Adventures in Wood Finishing
right
somewhere.
You got it, John? All right. So that's enough, Mitch. The halo that should be around Mitch. I'm trying to get that on there, Mitch. You ready for that?
We've got a halo, yes.
Got the halo going. All right.
I don't know about that, but you're very kind. Thank you ever so much. As an educator and as a learner, I try to teach the way I learn. The way I learn is to understand what I'm dealing with. So when I joined the program, there were things being done, and as Mike referred to it as fine working, the fundamentals of what finishing is. It's communication. I remember getting a call one day saying, "Have you seen this new magazine?" I said, "What's it called?" Fine Woodworking. I said, "I'd never heard of it." And so you start seeing names like George Frank, how to keep cherry from blotching, and Bob's and Don Duell and George Mustow had some really good articles in there. And so I need to know. I've learned to come to know what I need to know is how does this thing work. And at the same time, Bob is on his quest to do what he's doing. We finally met up. And we were on the same track where I did my internship at the Smithsonian. Don Williams changed my program all around. It's a chemistry art thing. It's got to be respected. George Frank was really bothered by not having the respect as a woodworker. I'm a wood finisher, and it's a respectful trade and repairing and such and such. And so George was a good foundation. And then I met Bob. He was lecturing on the road with me, and I got on the quest of what he's doing, what I'm doing. And then when you talk about Bob, those who know Bob is Bob.
Yeah.
Bob is Bob. You know Bob, you say, Bob is Bob. So I'm looking at Mr. Flexner here, and he knows where I'm coming from. He's come from, and he looks at me and says, I have no idea why anybody would take your program when they could just read my book. Okay, Bob. Okay. So we had a good rapport that away, and if I needed some help, he was good there. Then he got a hold of me a couple of times on editing his video, and he was just he supplied for me and the students that are recipients is how to use that book. It's nomenclature. You've got to know the buzzwords. I get emails all the time saying, example, I'm using Waterlox varnish and I put on 3 coats with a rag and it's still gummy. Okay. And how do what's going on? What's going on? Well, if you read Bob's book, you go, what is an oil finish? What is a varnish finish? What are the components? How does it cure? And so instead of writing the whole chapter, I'd go, oil needs oxygen to cure, not evaporation. Okay. You're putting on too hot, too heavy. There's not enough air exchange in the room. The chemically can't do it, wants to do it. You have to make friends with it and understand it. So his book I had an outline of what Don taught me about, when you say mineral spirits or aliphatic hydrocarbon, that's the information on the back of the can that you need to know and understand your own problems. And so sprayers called me up. They don't know anything about viscosity and temperature and wet mill thickness and dry mill thickness. And their question is 3 coats enough? So since we can't, as learners, we can't, like you said, John, 12%, 10% on any given lecture, and you need some place to go back to going, I'm in trouble. How do I use Bob's book? Well, the way I taught how to use Bob's book was saying, you're going to buy the book, and this weekend you're going to thumb through and see every page. Just thumb the pages, and just thumb the pages. Just don't absorb anything. Just kind of, that's interesting, or whatever that is. and then go back over again and find a chapter that tripped your trigger, saying it was the varnish one or shellac or whatever your mission is to use this book, and then just look at the highlighted areas so that you can draw from my lecture the words that I gave you, the test that you took comes back to you. Okay. I got a great CRS story on that one too. And so, what I go now to get yourself 3 different magic markers, and one's green, one's yellow, one's orange. And so when you read through this chapter saying, green is something you didn't know. It's a buzzword, wash coat. Okay. Yellow describes wash coat, and orange is a safety factor saying in these wash coats, be careful of this. So I'm thinking my students, after they leave after 9 months, can't remember 9 months worth of information, but they have enough written material that I gave them, enough of Bob's book as to lean on, saying, I need to go back and refresh my memory on spraying or whatever. And so I had one guy, I'm 30 years old. I'm talking to a 50-year-old guy, and he takes the test, and he's not doing very well. And he says, Mitch, you're really busting my chops. I said, how's that? He goes, I've been out of school a long time, and, learning is tough, and you're throwing this at me. It's a lot of buzzwords. I'm trying to learn a lot of memorizing. I said, I'll tell you what, let's make a deal. You take the test, circle the ones that you know, put a question mark by the ones you don't, but you can't remember it. You said you can't remember it. And he was, whatever. And he says, but I like that. He says, but I got CRS. And I said, I'm sorry to hear that. Is it catchy? Is it, what is CRS? He goes, I can't remember stuff.
Yep.
So I said, take your test home tonight, go to his book, find the answer. That's all I care about anymore is, if you can't remember it, where do I go to that I can trust where the information is? I'm doing something wrong. Bob has been totally helpful in educating people who learn how to use that book. And so when John keyed into shellac, that was one of many things that Bob wanted to make us aware of. And in my 9-month program, once the woodworking is done, get out of our way, because we know abrasives and colors and coatings and repairing and restoring and restoration. And Don Williams gave me the conservation angle. And so some of my students would go into new furniture, some would go into old furniture, some would go just into repair. And I have literally so many past students who contact me going, I'm giving classes on wood finishing using Bob's book. So I marvel at his energy level, because that's what I was searching for too, to tie the buzzword. Let's have one word mean one thing and understand what it means. So if you want to be a sprayer, you got to learn what's the spraying terminology. And I'm going to help folks on that are already in business and companies that are making the spraying things. It's amazing how little information they have and how I don't know how to stay in business. And they're easy to fix, because I can give them a buzzword and I say, let's call this, that. And Bob was very, very helpful. And with the way if I were to write a book, it'd be shaped like he did. He was short, sweet, to the point, but it has the information you need in it. And the fact that when I read the first one and I got his second one, he made some really great improvements, especially on solvents, because it's a solvent world. And page 141 is all filled full of how to solve finishing problems with chemicals. But you gotta be in that zone. But it's there, professional or beginner. So that's 9 months of that.
Today's show is sponsored by Shaper Tools, maker of the handheld CNC router Shaper Origin. Origin is used by fine furniture makers, cabinet makers, and woodworking professionals around the world to achieve tight-fitting joinery, custom templates, or flawlessly install hardware like concealed hinges, all thanks to its built-in autocorrective mechanism. Best of all, Origin requires zero computer programming. It's easy to learn, and at the end of the day, packs up into a sustainer that you can store under your bench, making it friendly for small shops. Learn about Origin by visiting shapertools.com/origin. It's funny because when I hear y'all talk about Flexner on, or I almost said Flexner on finishing, understanding wood finishing, it's almost like hearing a wood guru scientist talk about oh my God, it's just escaped me. Hoadley, where it's like you have Hoadley's book, you have Flexner's book.
I got to get that one over here.
But those are the two textbooks that should probably be in every wood shop, it sounds.
Oh, absolutely.
There's no question, Ben.
And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, Bob was working on the third edition near to his end, right? I mean,
actually, with Megan Fitzpatrick.
Yeah.
So for the rest of that story, I think you could better get that more directly from Megan.
Okay.
But
well, all right.
I was able to talk to. I'll tell this one quick story. Bob's son is called Soren. Lovely Danish name. Bob's wife is Danish as well. And he contacted me and said, Bob is dying. He's pretty bedridden. If you have any stories or anything you'd like to write down that I can read aloud, if Bob can't really read, if anything I could read to him, would you send it along? So, Ben, you know me well enough. I wrote a 4-page thing. And I named a bunch of names of, all these different people that he knew from over the years. And little anecdotes and stories about different things that we had done. And I was really happy to be able to do that because that was within like the last 10 or 12 days that he was alive. Mm. And Soren said to me he really enjoyed it because it was just, good old memories. But what you said about being the foundational reference book is exactly right. It's the place you go when you need to find out the answer and you want to make sure that you're getting it the right chemical thing, the right physics, the right whatever it is. It's not something when I teach mostly casual students that are not really professionals. Occasionally I'll get somebody in the class and I say to them, Bob's book is not a cookbook. You can't open up the book and learn how to make something. Okay. If you want those books, Jeff Jewett has a wonderful book. Jeff was in our group for many, many years. Jeff's building guitars now. Terry Masacci has some good books about how to actually create a certain finish, a pumpkin pine or a aged stickly finish, whatever. That's not what Bob was all about. Bob was about this underlying science and all of the reasons why things do what they do. And his big enemy was the manufacturers because they refused to share information. I show my students now, I print all the MSD sheets from all the products. And I have them in a big binder. And you can look them up and you go, oh, that really is all the same stuff the other guy uses. Well, yeah, it is. So that was part of Bob's mission, but it was remarkably successful. And it's amazing how far it reverberates. That one little stone in the pond has just made waves out for generations. It's pretty cool. You included, Ben.
Me included.
Literally, sure.
No, well, no, I'm so quite honestly, I would say that your course, Mike, is probably the video version of like we're getting to the basics of understanding what each finish, entails and blah, blah, blah. And I am working with a totally new to me water-based finish now for guitars. And I was honestly sitting there applying it the other day and buffing it out. And I was like, you know what? I know exactly what the next step is. I know exactly what it's going to do because I know the fundamentals of finishing. It is, this solvent that I'm looking, this is how I'm going to thin it. If I want to go a little bit thinner, this is what the thing is, and I'm looking at the material sheets and figuring it out. And it's all because of that basis knowledge that, came from Flexner and came from you. And
well, I'll let my friends talk a little bit more, but I'll just say this. When all of this started way back in the day, everybody that became part of the original foundation of group all said when we first got to that big conference at Mitch's, this is the first time I've ever talked to anybody else who does what I do. Mm-hmm. Everybody was an island. unto themselves, and they were repeating the same mistakes that they had learned from whoever taught that guy who taught that guy. And there was no organized way for this information to get communicated, which we now have all these other tools. And as I think all of you know, my primary trade is upholstery, and upholsterers are always underappreciated, in my opinion, and also unorganized until the last few years, where we now have a national association. We have some people working toward getting some standards and doing some things. The finishing industry has never really done that in the same way. It's just not organized in a way that the information that people need is communicated in the way that the woodworkers do.
Well, there's a lot of competition in there was, you remember how the upholstery trade used to work. It was piecework. And if you knew how to do button tufting, you got extra money in your paycheck. And so you didn't show anybody how to do it. Yeah. And finishing was, the same way. If you could create a really beautiful finish and the guy down the street didn't do as nice a job, well, you weren't going to tell him how to do it. And it was interesting that when groups started, I mean, we had the gamut of people who were really high end and people who would just dip and strip and shoot it and out the door. And the evolution of skills, you can actually chart over the years of just how much we improved in our own skills just by sharing.
One of my favorite stories, I'll tell this quick. I want to let Mitch tell his story too. But at the first group gathering, I got to invite all these different people. And I did a seminar where we paired up people from, as John was saying, from different disciplines. I had Benny Bixenman, who was the head chemist of Benco, namesake of his company, producing methylene chloride and all the other stripping chemicals. I had him in the same seminar with Mike Townsend from Golden Artist Colors, who was the master of acrylics. And it was this incredible smashing together of all these people from different disciplines for the first time. And it was magic stuff. We had an absolutely amazing energy, but it didn't really carry over to anything that became a professional trade group. That still doesn't exist.
It was close.
Well, I don't know. Even if you can speak to that, if you can. You're out there teaching still.
Yeah, no.
I'm still seeing, the people in the trade and the folks that I was educated to be responsible for walking on board and saying, if you know what I know, I'm in the right place because I can contribute. And having had the 9-month background, they had chosen what occupation they wanted to be in. So the whole premise was, if you're walking into a class act shop, you better be a class act unknowledgeable person because you already know the lingo. That they don't, and you're valuable because you don't have the time to teach you that all. And if they don't know what you know, you're still valuable because you can help. You can problem solve, which is the whole idea anyway. This whole thing leads to problem solving, regardless if you're the new finisher or the professional finisher. Getting the buzzwords down and the nomenclature leads to communication, which means that me and myself, my students, can solve a lot of problems on the phone because we speak the same language. This means this and this means that. So one thing that we split hairs with Bob was just when you use the word stain, to use it as a verb or a noun. Mm-hmm. Okay. So if there are dyes and dye stains and chemicals and pigments, okay. So if you've already used the dye stain as a noun verb, and I put a pigment with dye, what do I have? I have a dye stain. Why do I care if I have a dye stain? Because it's 2 for 1. I get a dye reaction of what a dye is supposed to do, what a reaction the stain is supposed to do, and I can skip a step to get the job done. So dye stains to a finisher who can mix their dyes with their stains is valuable information, and that's the chemistry you need to make sure those are compatible. So whether we talk about the classes that Mike mentioned, I teach at Mark Adams. I've been there for 28 years, been teaching 35 at the Tech College, Mike. And, it's all the same. So it's whether we talk to, whatever realm of education they're in, it's all back to communicating and problem solving. So when the pros are having problems, and it's back to buzzwords, let's call a dye, a stain has pigment, mix the two together. Now you have a dye stain. So Bob didn't care for that, but that's That's all. I'm not going to die on the
Mitch,
hill.
once your program ended, nothing took its place.
Correct.
So where is wood finishing education today?
It doesn't exist. I've been teaching for Mark Adams called Hands-On Finishing. It's twice a year. It fills up every time. Finishing fills up all the time. That's for a 5-day hands-on class. Mark Adams is the only answer I got that's doing anything in that capacity.
So there's no more trade school programs. There's no more like this is the new direction for my life. I am now a furniture finisher. It's all small week-long classes and things like that. There's no more.
Or you're learning on the job.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, companies. There are companies over here. You have Bob Chicky, who has a big company, who's starting. He's making new stuff. And he goes around and he sells it and teaches a factory how to shoot this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all done within kind of a corporate structure, a factory that's making this stuff. They're not getting people who already know what they're doing. They have to train them. They have to have a schedule that they tell them what to do. It's almost robotic. You have it all set up for them. I mean, it is robotic now. Some of all the car painting is all robotic.
So,
Ben, I'll give you a quick anecdote. We went out to Iowa a couple of years ago for the Handworks event, all of us.
Yeah.
Right, at Amana. The Amana Furniture Factory is a nationally known, multi-generational company that makes high-end furniture. I got to visit their shops. I got to spend some time with their people. They were spraying old-fashioned straight lacquer for years. It's what they did. It's what they knew. And their goal now is to convert to waterborne because of all the reasons. Well, they don't have any place to go to send the young kids that they have a couple of really good young fellas that work in the shop. They want to send those fellas somewhere and pay for it to have them really learn. So they're going to wind up going to maybe something hosted by the manufacturer of the product.
Yeah. Huh.
Yeah, there's no more place to go to for an in-depth. I had 36 credits in my program. 3 of them were woodworking and 33 were in finishing.
Wow.
And every class had 9 months. The first class was color theory, a full month of color theory. Don't clean your bench off. Every day we're going to be doing color theory. And every day the second class was a spot repair 1, nicked in, scratch repair. Got to have a kit, $500. Class number 3 was, now that you know that, let me show you this. And we were actually invited into furniture stores to work on their furniture, but we'd come in 20 abreast and just saying, we need something to work on in real life. And so they would allow us. So at that particular point, we had a furniture service technician certificate of diploma saying, and I got so many people that call me back saying that's all I do. I work out of my spot repair box and I go on location and I make X amount of dollars per day, per hour. The next class was wood shop. Then it was a class on understanding finishing. Then it was an advanced finishing. And then there was a restoration class. It's the last class we ended up on was after 9 months of saying, now let's rock and roll. Whatever you bring, full dining, you got to get a full table and 6 chairs, dining room table and 6 chairs, refinished in X amount of time and pile on as much as you can. So everybody found their home. You might have really liked it, but didn't care to do it, or just the opposite, saying this is my life. This is just changed my life, and I got an occupation that I can feed my family with. So, there's not a place like that anymore that I know of.
That is such a shame.
I'll give you a quick anecdote that you'll enjoy. I went out at the last restoration session. I used to go out and teach a day or so of basic upholstery, pull and tack, slip seat upholstery for his students. And one year I went out there, in the back row was a very tall, quiet, barely spoke student who didn't really say much and was not in any way a superstar. His name was Joshua Klein. And for those that don't know, Joshua has founded a magazine called Mortise and Tenon that has done extraordinarily well. Mm-hmm. And even Josh can trace his roots back to Mitch.
See?
How about that?
Very, very proud of that young man. He came in willing to work, and he was a luthier to begin with. He went to school for that. But once he got into the chemistry and artwork of restoration, he just took off. And then they wrote that book. Brilliant young man.
Yeah.
That's awesome. It's the coaching trees, the Bill Parcells coached, with so and so.
No, this is more like Vince Lombardi.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, this is
Okay.
it's it all kind of starts with George Frank, and then kind of so Mitch, you knew George.
Yeah, we keyed in on George once we learned about Fine Woodworking Magazine, invited him in, and he came and visited. I think he signed my book 6 times. He was there. He just signed the same page, and off we go. Now my George Frank story is we haven't met, we barely talked. He comes in, is late from the plane. He comes walking in and says, "Where are my students?" "Okay, George, let's take over." And he said, "Look, first we do a surface prep." "That's good, George." I got my cabinet scraper, and he dug it out, and he sharpened his cabinet scrapers for surface prep. And he did it a different way than I did. I do the tie-free method, and he did it another way. And so I went and got my scraper and did it his way, and I pushed it on a piece of wood, and just absolutely nothing happened. And who's standing right behind me on my right shoulder? And I turned my head, and he goes, he just shook his head. And he goes, "And you teach this?" The first spoken words of the master George Frank we invited into the wood finishing program, eye to eye, he just crucified me right there. Just stick with. So I tried his way again.
Yeah.
That bugger was right on my left side this time. He moved around like he had roller skates. He was critiquing everybody all the time right now. And so he gave me the second look, and he took his head and he walked away. So I did it my way. I did it tight freeze way, and I made myself presentable. And I got this is what I was looking for. And he patted me on the shoulder and says, "I knew you'd get it." But his book was storytelling. And so I guess I adapted the same way for teaching with stories. And, then it kind of puts a tie in there. So when you're going to get students would be working all the things that I teach them from Bob, and they go, I will associate something they did wrong. I said, let's learn from it, make a fun story out of it. And he was a storyteller and how he improved things, and it's a good read. I just saw it on eBay for about $12. It's worth the effort.
So George Frank was literal stories of his career and everything, and it was almost the opposite of understanding wood finishing, which is very
technical
and dry. Right. So now everybody needs 3. They need Hoadley, Flexner, and George Frank.
Well, you know what? For all those who had the privilege of meeting George, what I walked away with, he wasn't chemically right all the time, but he was guided that made it work. I'm not sure how. Okay. He admitted that, but he knew how to do it. And he could match colors and explain it. He could fetch polish and explain it. And he knew his chemical dyes. He could do it and explain it. But what you don't get from others is the passion. That man was incredibly in outer space passionate about finishing wood, and he wanted to share that with anybody who would listen at any time. And when you ended the lecture with him after the story, you couldn't wait to fire out of your seat and I tried to. I learned a lot from George, but what I really picked up on was this is really a great trade. It's really fun to make things color and change. We could take walnut and make it another color and have some fun with it and make finishing fun. Finishing is not fun because they don't understand it. They don't understand it because they're visual learners, and books. And Bob's book is, you can learn from reading. You can. John's proof of that. And John's website has how his version of shellac is. And that's just passing on the information. I'm sure I catch that same passion from John. If you're passionate about what you're doing and finishing, that comes from me. It's like, let's have some fun. I mean, if you're not having fun, there's 2 rules to finishing. Wood finishing, rule number 1 is wood finishing is fun. Rule number 2 is wood finishing is not fun all the time.
So, well, you know what I mean, one of the things that probably drives me a little bit up a wall is that I've always loved the finishing part, because when I'm dealing with antiques, I'm often dealing with some things that are made out of absolutely exquisite woods, Brazilian rosewood and ebonies, and just things that have so much potential to be beautiful once you put a beautiful finish on them. And people who make furniture are tired by the time they get to the end of the woodworking part, and they don't get the reveal of this beautiful thing that you spend in the beginning. They can't spend enough money on beautiful woods, and then you got to do the final thing. And for me, the reveal is like, once I put even the alcohol on it just to see what it looks like, it's like, oh, all right, now I know what I'm going to do. Because
and for those folks, I'm going, woodworking has two main attributes: function and design. That's what woodworking is.
Yeah.
And once you adapt to saying what the finishing is no different, what do you want the finish to do, and what do you want it to look like? How do I get there? There's so many choices. Take a hands-on finishing class of Mark Adams and eliminate 90% of what's on the Rockler shelf, because you're going to find this fits what I want it to look like. This fits how much protection I need, and this is how much effort I want to put into it. So it's like the boards they'll do at Mark's are like, here's a rub-on oil finish, guaranteed from the manufacturer to be the best thing ever. This is ice cream. Okay. Go ahead.
Well, okay. Real quick though, you both are touching on something that I think our audience could learn from, because our audience is primarily woodworkers, right? They're building the piece from scratch. And I think that many times woodworkers are scared of ruining the last 3 months of their life.
I got a method for that.
Let me give you a story, Ben, really quick for your audience. And 2 or 3 issues ago, or maybe it was 2 issues ago, on the front cover of Fine Woodworking was a gorgeous high chest.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
And it wasn't easy to know this, but if you read the captions in the pictures, you would know that was built by Bob Van Dyke.
Mm-hmm.
And it was actually a story that was Chuck Bender's article about moldings, but the gorgeous piece on the front cover was done by Bob. I was part of that process. I was in the shop when Bob was building it. He got it all the way done, and he had exactly the experience that you just described, which is, I don't want to screw this up.
Yeah.
So that piece was actually finished by a fellow called Tad Fallon, who went to school with Don Williams, and all the dots connect, Ben.
Yep.
All the dots, but that fear of screwing it up is absolutely why people come and take my classes or Mitch's classes or John's classes.
Yeah.
Well, I tell my students, I say, bad finishing can ruin the best woodwork, and good finishing can make bad woodworking look terrific.
And the same thing with, when I'm lecturing these folks on why are you building this piece of furniture and you have no plan of attack for finishing? If you can't finish a flat board 18 by 20 to the color, rub out, surface prep, color, coat, make your mistakes, pick a varnish, pick a shellac, pick something that interests you. And what are you doing building furniture before you even have a plan of the finishing? So the hands-on finishing classes, they're not even capable of asking good questions yet. They don't have enough information to ask a good question.
Right.
And so that's what helps with Bob's book, saying, read about varnish, read about lacquer, read about shellac, just get introduced to something, and then you can find a place to learn from it. That'd be great. But to take and make and start from start to finish on a flat piece of wood that's the same species you're working on, poplar, birch, maple, whatever, cherry, they want to learn where to spend their money to get results that they're looking for. So the hands-on finishes, let's just draw back and going, no more building furniture. But that's a 3-dimensional object that has its own challenges. But if you can't pull it off on a flat board, you can go there. That looks good. I like what they do with that. That I got confidence. When you ask them how many hours you got in woodworking, they go 1,000, million years. How many hours do you have in brushing varnish? You really want to get good at brushing varnish? Cut up a sheet of plywood, 4 by 8, and a 1 foot squares, and just make that the mission.
Yeah.
That's my approach to taking away the fear. First, give me something to work with, and then teach me something about how to use what I'm working with.
Well, I've done that very thing with Mike leading the way, and John, I'm almost positive you teach the same thing with French polishing, where it's you're not going to get it your first time, right?
No, like by the end of the weekend, they get it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But your first attempt at French polishing, it's not going to be smooth sailing.
No, it shouldn't be. And the greatest thing is that when they make a mistake, it's a learning opportunity for the whole class to come and see why this went south, and everybody learns from it. So it accelerates things. But, with a few basic rules, because I deal primarily with shellac. So with a few basic rules of shellac, even the amateur can get a pretty good finish. And even if they screw it up, they can surface it with steel wool and put a coat of wax on it, and it still looks better than most other finishes. So, there's a few rules you have to learn.
So I'm going to give you a last thought on behalf of Bob, who would have been on the soapbox long before now, and he would have been railing against the furniture that's being built, Mitch, either at Mark's or at the center, all the contemporary furniture makers. The furniture is white. This is the term they use in Maine. We're going to let the wood speak. Okay. So sapwood doesn't matter. Knots don't matter. Flaws don't matter. We're going to let the wood speak. We're going to put a little bit of slather, like what Bob would call it, Osmo or one of the wipe-on new finishes, one and done, and we don't care about it. And if the customer likes it, we're good. So some of the elegance of the trade that John and Mitch are talking about, that value is not perceived by some of the modern makers and their clients. They don't see it. They just want it basically, off the saw with a little bit of slather on it. Okay. It's just different.
Well, but don't you think
I find the same thing in the upholstery trade, where the people don't want some of the traditional work done traditionally, even though, some of us have antique work where people care about how it's done. But a lot of contemporary furniture does not care about the finishing.
Don't you think that that's cyclical though? Because
I hope so.
I'm sure there were furniture finishers back at the heyday of the mid-century modern, the Danish movement, that thought, oh, well, there's no real color work being done here. There's no real, they're not caring about the finish other than spraying it with a lacquer and moving on. And then, but I mean, there's probably ebbs and flows to it.
Well, there's also, the modern cabinet making, there's very little wood selection. So there's very little, you'll see tables that are made up of 6 different types of maple. And the only way to finish that is to put some kind of masking, stain, a pigmented stain, in order to mask it so that it has a harmonious look to it. When you get something that's made out of book-matched boards, as a piece of walnut or something, and you don't have to do nearly as much work with the coloring because you already have beauty right there sitting at you, looking at you. So, those are the kinds of things that benefit from less is more. You can put on a finish without having to do a whole lot of color work.
Well, I think that this conversation could probably go on for 3 hours. And
say Ben,
easily.
Ben,
that's an hour for each of us. That's not enough.
Yeah.
No, Ben. What was that second thing you thought your subscribers wanted to hear and see? You mentioned one, which we got you going.
Oh, no. I think, to me, it is that whole fear of ruining a piece, because finishing is an art that is just as complicated and technical and skillful as all of woodworking, right? And it's tagged onto the tail end of every woodworking project by hobbyist woodworkers, so a part of me wonders if hobbyist woodworkers such as myself could probably, if the means are there, benefit from hiring a finisher, to take that piece across the finish line. Oh, geez, I walked right into that one. But I mean,
for the jung.
There
Yeah.
you go, man.
but like, so, but it to me, it's a little bit scary because it sounds like there's not that many finishers around anymore if there's no programs to teach them.
Yep.
So what does the future hold for this art? What do you think, Mitch?
Well, I think as long as there's wood to work with and there's wood workers, the finishing won't go away. Just we're back to education, saying, find it where you can. And you're right. There's no place really to go to get it through on depth thing. So the Mark Adams, I just had to, what Mike is doing as well. Just give me some basics to start with and let me take it from there.
And then go out there with some sample boards and make mistakes, right, John?
And if they really want, I think what they're learning is that they don't know where to start. That's fair. And if they don't want, you gotta commit yourself to it. You chose this style of woodworking, bandsaw. Boom, that's all I do. I just do all bandsaw work, and I just need a finish it comes on aerosol can or rub on oil. And then if you get into the refinishing part, that's what John is doing and such. You got to have your act together.
Yeah, I'm going to give you one other perspective, which we could be a subject of another podcast. We have a bunch of friends in this business, in the chemistry business, but the chemistry is changing.
Mm-hmm.
The solvents that are needed to do some of the traditional finishing are going away. They're being regulated out. And as that happens, some of the stuff that we would traditionally have been teaching that's not going to even be possible. I just had some conversations with a fellow who's developing from an automotive product a UV cured wood finish.
Yeah.
It's going to be instant apply, instant cure, no solvents, 100% solids, yada, yada, yada. I mean, the chemistry is going to drive part of where this is going, whether we like it or not. And that would drive Bob absolutely up the wall because the manufacturers are not telling us anything about how those things actually work. It's just do this, and you get this magic result.
Well, and it's not just the result; it's the future of this finish. Because once you've gotten a scratch on it, or once
exactly,
once the sunlight has bleached it out, and it's now no longer what it was, you have to refinish it, and there's a whole nother, you can't buy methylene chloride anymore to take off some of these intractable finishes. I was just telling Mitch that I have had a small table in the shop. I couldn't cut it with anything. I could not touch this finish with methylene chloride or anything. And I ended up making a new top because it was a thin veneer. If I scraped it, I would have gone through the veneer.
Mm-hmm.
So so I just made a new top. So we're getting to the point where not only are people not thinking about, they're not thinking about the restorability of these finishes, because, it's one thing to make something really beautiful off the gun and stuff, but when you have to go and touch it up and you can't match that sheen because it's, I mean, Mitch knows more about that stuff than I do, because it's not hand applied anymore.
Yeah.
Great. I mean, for me, that's why shellac is so wonderful. It's just because it has so many of those qualities that allows me to go back into that finish again and make it beautiful again.
Yeah, my name is Mitch, and I'm a shellacaholic.
Yeah.
Welcome, Mitch.
Welcome, Mitch.
Well, that does it for this episode of Shop Talk Live. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, John. Thank you, Mitch. It was an honor having the three of you on, and it was wonderful to hear a little bit more about Bob Flexner. Woodworkinginamerica.com. Get on it, folks. If you're watching on YouTube, please click that thumbs up button. Leave a comment. Help us juice that algorithm. We sincerely appreciate it. All right. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode. Have a great one.